Stadia has a problem.
Are you listening?
You know what? That might seem like a pretty harsh statement, so let me just reframe that real quick. When Google Stadia was first announced, I was one of those that was skeptical at first. The idea of streaming video games over the internet at the same quality as locally based hardware was honestly a hard concept for me to understand. But when I finally got my hands on Stadia and I was able to try out Destiny 2 and it felt just like I was playing on the PlayStation, I had a realization. This is going to change everything. When other platforms were touting teraflops, Stadia was delivering 0 installs, no waiting around for patches or updates, faster load times, 0 storage concerns, and the freedom to play your game on any screen that you wanted. While Sony and Microsoft debuted their next generation consoles, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, Stadia was busy ushering in the next generation of gaming. And to go back to the beginning of this video and talk about the problem. One of the most apparent problems with Stadia is that the technology works. Google has proven that if you have sufficient internet, playing games on Stadia is awesome. In fact, if you were to ask any player who has experienced Stadia, when they go back to playing a game on a traditional locally based console, you have to wait for like installs or updates, or you have to do the whole, I gotta uninstall this game to play this one. The simple word is it sucks. And probably the biggest problem of Stadia working is that not enough developers are embracing it to truly make it the only console that you have to own. Because somewhere along the line, game announcements started to come and Stadia, for the most part, was ignored. Guardians of the Galaxy launched a cloud version of the game on Nintendo. Games like Dying Light 2, Kingdom Hearts, Elden Ring, Grid Legends, WWE 2K22, Tiny Tina's Wonderland, Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, MLB The Show, and NBA 2K22 all were announced or released with no mention of Google Stadia. And honestly, the surprising part about that is most of those games were from developers who previously brought their games to Stadia. However, a key point to remember is that in the beginning, to make up for low player counts, Stadia paid large sums of money to help bring those games to the cloud gaming platform. And now that the money has dried up due to either deprioritization or just the closing of Stadia Games and Entertainment, those of us hoping to see the next WWE or NBA game, we're just out of luck. Because the sad fact is, without money, Stadia is just Stadia. And unfortunately, in this situation, a lot of Stadia's initial strategy is working against them. Take Rockstar's parent company, Take-Two. Stadia reportedly paid $10 million to bring Red Dead Redemption 2 to Stadia, which means even if the game doesn't establish a large player base, Google's initial payday justified the time invested. And you see, this is where it comes down to the cost versus benefit. Without Stadia fronting the bill, the cost to port a game to Stadia now rides on how many copies the game will sell. And sadly, this is kind of a situation where Google opened Pandora's box, because with a smaller player base, it might be hard to justify the initial cost of bringing your game to Stadia. And with Stadia no longer fronting the cost of porting, we end up in this weird hamster wheel of, will the game come to Stadia or will it not? And granted, when I say small player base, I don't even know how big Stadia's player base is. No one actually knows. Like, I for one have nearly 1,000 friends on Google Stadia, and at any given moment, there's about 40 to 60 people online. Another estimate you could use would be the Elden Ring petition, where over 2,000 people have signed to bring Elden Ring to Stadia, or you could use the Stadia Destiny 2 player count, which right now is averaging around 5,000 players a day. Granted, I think that all of those numbers are wildly low compared to what the true active Stadia player base is. In fact, a recent Business Insider article suggested that Stadia missed their initial goal of 1 million players, and the cloud gaming platform is hovering around 750,000 players. But again, none of this has been officially confirmed by Stadia, so really it's just speculation. But if it were true, it definitely would explain why so few developers are looking to embrace Stadia. Leading us to another part of the problem. So far in 2022, Stadia has added 18 new games. Let's take a second and let that sink in. We are nearly 5 months into 2022, and we have received 18 new games. It has been 117 days, which means Stadia has been launching a brand new game roughly every 6 days. And this is where most of the diehard Stadia supporters will point out that typically Stadia has a slow start to the year, which is kind of correct because in 2020, by this time, Stadia added 18 new games. However, in 2021, Stadia nearly doubled that number by adding 43 new games to the platform during this same time period, which you would think that going into year 3 as a platform and you've built all these relationships and partnerships, Stadia would be building upon that number, not going backwards. Plus, that number becomes even more concerning when you compare Stadia's 18 games for 2022 to other gaming platforms, like Xbox, who has launched nearly 149 new games this year, PlayStation, who has launched 253, and Nintendo, who launched an absurd 462 new games so far this year. And just for a quick clarification, those numbers come from Metacritic's new game release list. I painfully counted each one of those, so if it's off by a couple numbers, my bad. But the point is, Stadia only launching 18 new games so far in 2022 is kind of concerning. Now, granted, Google has already said that in 2022, they plan on launching 100 plus games for their player base. But even if that happens, and Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox stay on this same path, Xbox will have launched 250 games. PlayStation will be at 506, and Nintendo will have launched nearly 1,000 games, when Stadia has just received 100. And while so far in 2022, Stadia players have received games like World War Z and Life is Strange, with titles like Five Nights at Freddy's, Security Breach, Overcooked All You Can Eat, and City Skylines arriving in the upcoming months, we've also seen the beginning of shovelware and mobile titles begin to creep into the Stadia library. And the absence of larger games is slightly understandable when you have major publishers looking for either a large player base or a payday. Currently, Stadia is offering neither of them. But then on the flip side, you have Sony and Microsoft who are buying up every major publisher possible. So the market for willing publishers to launch games on Stadia is only becoming slimmer and slimmer, making you wonder, what kind of future is Stadia going to have? Like right now, one of the largest publishing partners that Stadia has is Ubisoft. And there are already reports of them being bought out by a major company as well. So we could see Ubisoft be part of PlayStation or Ubisoft be part of Xbox, and those games no longer being a part of Stadia. And if Google were to lose Ubisoft, I mean, my God, this platform would look drastically different. But moving on from new games, even the topic of older games and long-term support only feeds into Stadia's problem. Stadia, unfortunately, has a problem with long-term developer support, with developers either not continuing to update the Stadia game with patches to address game-breaking bugs, or developers not adding the latest DLC expansions for Stadia players because it was never part of the plan. And if the games do get updated for Stadia, it's usually months after other platforms receive their update. In fact, right now on the Stadia Reddit page, there are a group of players who are categorizing every game and documenting which games have failed to receive the latest patch, or if it's missing DLC content entirely. Which, mazel tov to you all for doing this, but the point is, this should not be a thing 3 years into Google Stadia. The fact that developers are launching games on Stadia and saying, well, yeah, Jimmy, it is broken, but judging by the small player base, we'll get around to fixing it when we can, is ridiculous. Why would I trust any games on the platform if they're just gonna be ridden with bugs? The sad fact is, 3 years in and we are struggling to see AAA games, or really any games, come to the platform. Long-term developer support is almost nil. Stadia Games and Entertainment is officially dead. And all of this is happening when other cloud gaming platforms and other gaming platforms are doubling down on cloud gaming. And what makes that suck even more is Stadia's tech is so freaking good. Like, the majority of my frustration is surrounding the fact that I want to use Stadia more and I can't, which sucks. And look, I am a firm believer that the first step in addressing a problem is first admitting that a problem exists. Stadia has a problem. And as a founder and as a fan of the platform, I hope they can fix it. Or, I don't know, maybe Elon Musk will come and buy Stadia. Hey, thanks again for checking out our channel. If you like what you saw and you want to see more content just like it, which who wouldn't, hit the subscribe button right there. And while you're down there, hit the like button. Maybe even consider becoming a Nerf Report best friend.
just like the people listed down below did. In fact, don't you want to see your name there? I know I do.